The social contract theory places a responsibility on government to avail its citizens with the common good. One of the most important of these common goods is education. Important because it forms the foundation, it forms the bedrock, it forms the social fabric on which a nation and a future is built for any given country. Well, government in its aspirations, for whatever reasons, attempted to enhance the salaries or proposed to enhance the salaries of science teachers at the expense of the arts teachers. Well, this in particular caused a row between UNATU and government, and therefore an impasse and maybe a standoff, if you would wish to call it. And for 2 weeks, we saw that the arts teachers, but also in solidarity, the science teachers decided not to go to school and not to teach our young comrades who are in primary school and secondary school. Well, today, a distinguished panel of youth convenes again to explore this conversation. What were the effects of this particular 2 weeks impasse? But also, as of yesterday, we understand that the president met with the leadership of the teachers in this country, and some sort of agreement was reached. So we want to understand, does this agreement offer a sustainable solution to this crisis? Well, let's hear from our panelists for today as we shall explore this. So from the extreme left is Comrade Douglas Onen Drake, who is by now a very common face to religious followers of the Youth Roundtable. Douglas is a law student at Uganda Christian University and is about to become a regular panelist on this show. Douglas, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Comrade Kidega. I'm glad to be on this show, and stay tuned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next to Douglas is a first-timer. I think the only first-timer on this show and the only lady on this show as well. I will try to pronounce her name, and if I make a mistake, please forgive me. The name is Arikosi Iculet. Okay, Arikosi is a former guild president at Mbara University Science and Technology. Yes, something like that. Many thanks for joining us for the first time. Kindly say hello to our viewers this afternoon. I'm sure they'd love to listen to you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Kidega, for the invite. I'm really glad to be here to interact and share on a topic that is very close to our hearts and impacts all of us, even though we are not in the schools where it's being affected. By virtue of this being an education issue, all of us in one way or another are going to be impacted. So I'm glad to be part of this conversation.
Wow. Close to our hearts, you mean something like love, like something like maybe a relationship?
Something that we have passion for.
Okay.
Something that we have commitment towards.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Next to the guild president, the former guild president is, of course, a regular face now on this show, Comrade Lawel Muhwezi. He loves to refer to himself as the usual suspect. Lawel, many thanks for joining us.
Yes.
A member of the Now generation, but also a student of law at Makerere University.
Thank you so much. Once again, I'm always excited to be part of the engagement. I look forward to an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Madam Guild President, for obvious reasons, you're the only lady on the panel, but also you are a newcomer, you know. But, well, my question to you, just to start us off in this conversation, is that to someone who doesn't care to watch the news, does not read newspapers, probably has no smartphone, but this particular time he has landed on a link to the Youth Roundtable conversation, but he has no idea about what has been going on. What would you tell them? Could you give them a background of how the past 2 weeks have been, and how eventually yesterday the president met with the UNATU leadership and reached some sort of consensus? So what has been happening, like the whole background?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the issue that we're discussing today is about the teachers' strike, specifically the arts teachers' strike. Now, the strike of teachers has been going on for quite a while. It actually began around 2013, and there have been different public servants who have been striking over the course of the years. So eventually, the government deemed it fit to respond positively to the strike, albeit partially, by investing in increasing the salaries of science teachers. However, this strike for so long had been done in unison of arts teachers and science teachers. So for the government to selectively choose to only increase the pay of the science teachers left the arts teachers disgruntled. So this whole strike has been in solidarity of the arts teachers, who are still questioning the reasons why the government has backtracked on its earlier commitment to increase all science teachers' pay. Of course, they have their different reasons due to the failing economy and issues to do with that. So they felt that as opposed to not raising anyone's salaries, they would like to raise only the ones for the science teachers, then later raise the ones for the arts teachers. But the absence of a clear roadmap of how the eventual raising of the arts teachers left them questioning how soon that money will be paid, and that is why they sought to show their discontent through an industrial action, which is actually catered for in our constitution. So they have a right to actually show their dissatisfaction as teachers. And we all know that us in this room are here because at one point we went through a school of learning, and that's how we have come to be such wonderful individuals. So we know the value that not only science teachers have, but also the arts teachers, because they are the backdrop of our country. If we want to achieve the 2040 vision, we in no way cannot exclude teachers, all till at that. So that's the backdrop of why the teachers have been showing their discontent through an industrial action.
So has this ended? I mean, are they still on strike, or they are going to resume, teaching? Are they still on strike?
So after several meetings with different stakeholders in the government and amongst themselves, they have tentatively decided to proceed with teaching for the benefit of the learners. And by today, 6th July, they are going to continue teaching. But we all know that that disgruntlement and discontent is going to affect not only the children themselves, but the learners and even the parents. So despite them having agreed as teachers to all go back to teach, that discontent is going to be felt even after. The ripples haven't ended by them going back to teach. That wave is still going to be felt, and it may even worsen. Okay. Yes.
All right, fair enough. Comrade Lawel, I would love to also hear your opinion. What do you make of what is happening, in your own words?
I think that personally, I have issues with generally the nature and the character of our teachers. And I think it also has it's also part of the wider challenges with the public service. Because, to what can we say is enough for the teachers? Because you see, there is this argument that, an average teacher receives perhaps 400 or perhaps 700. But when you look at generally the public service, you realize that our country does not pay its public servants well. And we are a country that is not well endowed. Our financial envelope is not that wide to cater to satisfy these teachers. And so you're likely to have today teachers striking, and the next day you'll have maybe government engineers, the other day you'll have the medics. So I think that generally what we need is a comprehensive policy issue. So the biggest challenge I have with teachers is that even if you are able to pay them well, they're still going to run to private schools. I think last week I shared that kind of fear that even when government teachers are paid well, they will go and teach in private schools for the 4 days, and they will teach in a government school for 1 day. Because I think Ugandans just have this side gig syndrome. Even if you're paying them well, they want that extra money. And therefore, you're likely to have an instance or a situation that even when you pay them well, they'll still pay lip service to these government schools. I think that government, one, needs to let go of the responsibility of paying teachers and disburse these funds to the schools themselves to contract and to pay teachers. I think our government does not have capacity to shoulder that burden. I think the biggest challenge we have, that I've started with, is the commitment of these teachers. Their level of the love for the job and the country generally is lacking. And that's why I tell you, I don't think the challenge with the teachers is generally that the pay is not enough, because look, all of us really are struggling in all the professions, even the private sector. But even what they are paid, they don't commit to it. 70% of government teachers do side gigs in private schools, which they may not pay equally, but there's that extra money they want. And these are the ones that trusts. They're the ones who mark examinations. They're the ones who are at the center. So I don't even think this increment per se will reflect on the quality of students. I do not think that the reason the quality of students is not as appealing to the job market is because these teachers are not teaching because they are demotivated. I think generally, even when you pay these teachers the same money they want, I don't think they will somehow miraculously start teaching better than they have been teaching. So I think there is generally lack of commitment to their job. I think the government cannot continue to handle the issue of teachers because even after today, after 2 years, you can be sure they'll get back on the streets and they'll strike. Government really does not have those funds. Of course, we all are alive to the challenges of corruption, of misuse. You have some sectors of government returning money after the financial budget. Those challenges notwithstanding, I still think the problem is a policy issue, that to get those teachers in classes, take money to the schools, let those schools contract teachers, and they are appraised at that level, at the level of school. And for me, I think that's the policy suggestion I would want to advance, because I think there is generally lack of commitment, which has an effect on the quality of students they produce.
Okay.
And of course, this is a consequence of the whole opening up and privatization.
Yeah, we shall actually explore that later on. Comrade Onen, you've heard from our two comrades here. What is your own take about what is happening?
Let me first engage with Comrade Lawel Muhwezi. He brings a very interesting suggestion of policy that, as a result of the lack of commitment by the teachers, and regardless of the government increasing their pay, they will still not deliver. Well, allow me to cite for you a few examples. China, or the Asian countries, or the Asian tigers, from the 1950s, when they completed the war and there was a lot of high levels of unemployment, high levels of illiteracy, the government took it upon, excuse me, the government took it upon themselves to educate their population, to educate their young people, and then to date they're enjoying the fruits of such commitment they had for their people. Now, we come back to Uganda. We're in a state, let's just look at our history. When UPC was in power then, they educated quite a minimal number of citizens in Uganda, and that minimal percentage of citizenry that they educated are quality citizens at the moment. So if we are to talk about the commitment of teachers not educating, not being committed as much regardless of increment of pay, I think it will still come down to the argument of privatization that he fosters. Capitalism is something that has eaten up our system. People are only looking up for making profits, which as a result of capitalism, that's what everyone is up for. But when it comes to education, when it comes to nurturing a citizenry, when it comes to nurturing young people into better individuals, I think it's the mandate of the government. You cited out the social contract theory. It's the mandate of the government to holistically come and contract with its citizens. I think education shouldn't be a private commodity, because at the moment what is happening in Uganda, it is private. We have seen that 60.5% of lower primary pupils from P3 to P7 cannot competently read. And you may find most of these percentages are in government-owned schools. Now, the question of why are they in government-owned schools? The reason as why most of these percentages are in government-owned schools, number one, the lack of commitment that you cite comes as a result of the lack of incentive given by the government. If the government does not facilitate or give the incentive for teachers to teach amicably, to foster or to transfer knowledge to the students, then it results to the quality of citizenry that we are yet to receive. Because for me, I think, in my personal opinion, that if we are to invest in an education sector, because the students have a right to education as provided in our laws, the teachers themselves also have the right to industry action if the government is not paying them. So what the government have to do, what they have to do is, I think as a nation, as Uganda, we shouldn't have education as a private commodity. It should be a national commodity.
A common good.
Yes, a common good. They nationalize education. Before education was privatized, it was someone would study in a rural area down in Atiak and get good grades and still pass very well. We can cite for you various examples of individuals in this country who studied in village schools.
Owindolo.
They studied in village schools and are quality citizens today. Pick one person today who has studied in a village school and comes and can competently in the market. Are they there? They're not there now. Those are the side effects of one, the big argument of capitalism, the incentive of driving for profit. You see, Karl Marx brings out a very interesting tool of dialectical thought of change of quantity into quality. So if the quantity that we are making now, what kind of quality of citizenry shall we have? Education has been privatized. Private schools are flourishing. At the moment when strikes are going on, private schools are studying. And most people in Uganda cannot afford taking their children to private institutions. They opt for government institutions which are slightly cheaper, and teachers are still striking because the government does say they do not have money to facilitate these teachers. I think we need to go back to the drawing board. We should stop running a country like you're running a business. That's what's happening in Uganda at the moment. It's just a capitalist state that most people are profit driven, not looking at fostering or not looking at nurturing a citizenry that will take the country forever. Another second tool that these guys bring out is the idea of the AKA, or the alternative name is nothing lasts forever. Or they prefer to call it the negation of negation. Negation in the philosophical sense means the ending. So if nothing lasts forever, if you're a leader today, you will lead and your time will end. But then what kind of impact would you have had on the young generation then? Now imagine the people that are in these institutions that are affected. We are here discussing what kind of labor shall we have in years to come. Let's imagine we go with Lawel's opinion of taking the resources into these institutions, and still these institutions, because of the mindset, the bad mindset that we have as a nation, will still replicate the same effects. So we need to get back to the drawing board. I understand capitalism has taken a toll in most nations, but as society changes, our times will end. I think the generation of people that are alive at the moment, a generation of people from the 1940s to date, our time will end. But what kind of effect shall we have for the next generations to come?
Good question. Good question. Madam President, I think the two gentlemen here are artists, and I would understand if they vehemently, say that, whatever is happening isn't happening right. But you're a scientist, okay? You belong to the science part of this world. If you look at the biggest private players in the globe, the likes of Jeff Bezos, the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, the likes of, all these big names in the global international market are actually science leaning, or innovation leaning. So could it be true that we are simply being dishonest about this conversation, and that the truth is the world is moving towards science and innovation? And therefore, if Uganda as a country is to jump into the fourth industrial revolution train, if we are to compete fairly with the rest of the world, we must embrace science, we must embrace technology, science and technology.
Yes.
And that maybe is what government of Uganda is trying to do.
Yes.
But we are here trying to live in denial and saying that no, also arts is equally important. But when the actual truth is that science is actually more important today. So do you think that we are actually having a dishonest conversation?
No. And I would like to begin by really iterating clearly that while, yes, indeed, we need to have more investment in science and technology, that does not mean that arts are not important. We live in a world...
So you are agreeing with the government strategy?
I do not agree. I believe that sciences and arts are just as important as the other, because we live in a systemic world. These are things that are united and linked. One cannot work without the other. So even for the scientific side to thrive and flourish, there are elements of the arts that come to play to make that possible. So just to have issues like equity, have policies made that can support this investment in science and technology, we need the arts perspective. And more so in a world where we have complex problems. One discipline cannot work in isolation without the other. And we need to break that belief of working in silos, disciplinary silos, whereby lawyers are in one corner, medics are in one corner, accountants are in one corner. Yet you even just in a day, you find yourself interacting with all these different disciplines. Now, for the complex issues that we are facing in the world today, we need a lot of multi-sector collaboration. even just health challenges, just health challenges. If you know how health is defined, it's not just the absence of disease. It's general well-being, psychologically, socially, mentally, emotionally, and not just the absence of infirmity. So you not having HIV or you not having malaria doesn't mean that you are healthy. Now, when you look at that holistic perspective of what life is, you realize that all these different disciplines have a role to play, something to contribute to that pot that makes it full and able for all of us to thrive. So I really don't believe that we should prioritize arts at the expense, prioritize science at the expense of arts. We can all see that there needs to be that embracing of science and technology, but that should not be at the expense of the artists. There could be a way that these things can be equitably shared amongst the different stakeholders. But now, when we see that selective prioritization of disciplines, we're going to create disunity. And yet, even just in an NGO, there are different offices and they all work together for the good of the entire system. So even giving an example of Jeff Bezos, Ali, Elon Musk, within their organizations, there's a legal office, there's an accounting office, there is a records office, and all these things have a role to play for the grand goal of improving an organization. Even just in parliament, for parliament to work, trust me, it doesn't only need a lawyer. It needs all these different people coming together and making their unique contribution. So when we don't really see the value of each person's unique contribution, we risk spoiling the entire unit. It's like how bricks are laid one after the other. One may say the cornerstone is the most important, but without the other segments, there will not be a building to begin with. So I don't believe that there should be that prioritization of science at the detriment of the artists, because they are so valuable.
But you see, Madam President, the world is a give and take. You cannot have it all. You cannot say that you want to move towards innovation, but at the same time, you don't want to prioritize it. And priority comes with the investment of resources.
Exactly.
So I think that we are being, how should I call it, hesitant. We one step forward, two steps backwards. Because if it is innovation, let us invest our money and resources in innovation, science, and technology. As simple as that.
But we are saying
if someone has to lose because we are trying to advance technology, I mean, this could be spills of war.
But when we know for a fact that this is a recipe for disaster, because we are saying that this side cannot work in isolation, they cannot work alone. At one point, you're going to need the efforts of these people. So do we want to see a scenario whereby we have to come back and again recover what we knew was going to create a problem in the future, yet we can move in tandem and ensure that all aspects are balanced. Now, the arts teachers are not saying that scientists are not important, aren't saying that there's a need to invest in technology. No, they are not. But they are saying that we are just as valuable. There's something unique that we contribute to the global grand scale of things. And for our efforts to be sidelined and diminished just because there's an overwhelming emphasis in technology and science is a joke, honestly. Like I said, these systems work together. So you prioritizing this discipline, yet you're going to need this one. It's going to make that collaboration harder. And yet we are going into an era where there needs to be interdisciplinary collaboration. So now such policies, like overt discriminatory policies, are just going to create a bigger problem in the future.
Fair enough.
And they need to be stopped
now. I think what I pick from your argument is that this is like a pot sitting on 3 stones. When you remove one stone, the pot can collapse. Well, fair enough. Lawel, let me bring you in. Madam President here has emphasized one point in both her submissions, which is the aspect of discrimination and inequality. Legal scholars like you have addressed your mind to constitutional law and history. And you know that Dicey, who is known to us as the grandfather of rule of law, mentions equality before the law and fair treatment as one of the core tenets of rule of law. She says that this is discriminatory, approach towards salary enhancement. Do you think this is unconstitutional? The salary enhancements, is it unconstitutional?
I don't think it's unconstitutional because government has the discretion to determine what they pay their public servants. Is it fair? I think not. But I would not want to approach it from a legal point of view. But generally speaking, if you've interested yourself maybe in human resource management, you realize that people who are at the same level of employment have the same scale of salaries and payment. You get that if we're at the same level, the ranking of a company structure, we are supposed to be paid equally. And that is true. But I think why you have this is a general obsession by, I think, Africans or Ugandans to think that sciences are better than art. I don't think it is true. And you realize that in countries which are well off, especially Western countries, things like social welfare, social well-being of individuals is prioritized. I'll tell you, in the US, psychologists and psychiatrists are paid quite very highly, just like, of course, doctors. So I think the problem we have is we do not appreciate the role of the arts, because arts is also about studying human behavior, mind, that's psychology, social, natural sciences generally, but also you understand the role of history, especially given that countries run on their stability, and therefore you need politicians and a civilized society to be able to hold politicians accountable, to be able to make good decisions. Because at the end of the day, the sciences, innovations, etc. thrive on political decisions. And therefore we cannot neglect the position of history, of all these arts subjects. But I think there's generally an obsession with the idea of I'm doing biology, I'm doing PCB. And also there is no appreciation of the value of a vote, of the role of governments, of those political decisions. And I think intentionally because the leaders want to drive us away from that conversation. But I can tell you for sure that the arts are as important as the sciences. At that level of politics, at the level of civic awareness, but also at the level of social well-being. The idea that you need to be mentally stable. But also, for example, those who make robots, for example, they need to understand how does a human being relate. Even when you're pitching an application, these innovation awards, you must have an arts person to give that perspective. So I think there is all are equally important. There's just a general obsession as we study through school that the arts people are more important. It speaks also the African setting, really. But I would like to respond to him about, I think I smell a general obsession among people who read communist literature. Those are also those moral arguments, but I think we must be alive to the realities that China's growth was after tendencies of liberalism, of offsetting, allowing capitalist tendencies. They had to let go of particular institutions, and the current China is not a complete communist state. And so are the Asian countries. I think as we discuss this, away from the moral arguments, we are in a mixed economy. We are in a capitalist economy. We agreed to liberalize our education. This is where we are. So how do we move forward? I don't know if you get it. Like we don't have this whole thing of government can take over generally free education. Of course, at a bigger level, when we have grown our economy, like Zambia, etc., you can afford to put free education. But the reality here with a country that is highly indebted is that we need to maximize output with the little we have. So currently, government is paying teachers, but most of these teachers are running to private schools. They teach in private schools for 3 days, teach in government schools for 2 days, right? My policy proposal was that it's not like I'm saying we should make all schools private. I'm saying this money should not go directly to the teachers because they can afford to receive it and not teach. Let it go to government schools. The administration pays these teachers because it can monitor, supervise, and appraise them. Because then they are able to hold them accountable because they are the ones who pay them. I don't know if you get it. So and then the teachers have the duty to teach from Monday to Friday and know that their contractor is the school administration or the school board. I don't know if you get it. And usually government universities have this kind of operation. Makerere know that most professors are contract lecturers and contracts. Because the challenge we have is that commitment. How do you monitor it? And everyone who has employed people knows that it is about supervision, it's about holding them accountable. But currently, they can get their money and afford to go to private schools. Because this is what even us, how we operate, is that you have a main job and you have a side shop. I don't know if you get. So currently what we have, for example, at Makerere, that people close their offices at Senate and go to do their private business. You go to Senate for these issues and they're not there. And this is a general behavior in the public service where they do not have direct monitoring systems or supervision. And I think we must appreciate that the reason why also you have private schools thriving is because the best teachers are in government schools, but they teach in the private schools, and you have all these sorts of things. But what I want to borrow from him is the sense of patriotism is lacking. Even when you look at the private schools, they teach these students to just pass examinations. It is rare. I have been in private schools. Of course, I cannot mention names, but it's very hard to find a student who has comprehensive knowledge of how to deal with the world. That they don't know the world beyond Napoleon's journey to Russia. They don't know a lot beyond that. What do they call? Is it Ottawa?
Ottoman Empire.
There's this thing about the organs.
Automotive.
Yes. So that they only know what they are taught
skills
in class. Yes. So the discussion of the old people who are better educated cannot only be discussed in light of salaries. I don't think that they were highly most paid then, but it's that they were more dedicated to their job. They had a sense. Their satisfaction was from teaching a quality student. That if I saw one Moses doing good generally, I would feel good about it. I don't know if you get, but currently when you shift it to money as the incentive, then it means they will have to go to the private schools.
Okay, fair enough. Comrade Douglas, Lawel has dodged my legal question, but I will just throw it back to you again. Is this unconstitutional? Does this contravene the provisions of the law? Because I know that either Article 38 or Article 108 of our Constitution provides for equality of treatment. Okay, to people who are of people who are making equal contribution deserve to be,
it talks about things like gender. It classifies in what aspects that comes in.
Equality comes in.
Yes, well, gender. Could be, don't isolate the people with disabilities, could be about sex, tribe, and that. I don't think it's
okay. Let me just explore into Drake's legal understanding. Do you think that if these UNATU comrades of ours had gone to the Constitutional Court, do you think our independent judiciary would have declared this increment unconstitutional and therefore contravening with certain articles of the law? But also, too, I want you to speak to the aspect of labor unions, because we have seen UNAT putting up a very good fight. I think the gentleman, Mr. Baguma, he has been on TV, I think, every single moment of the day. And he has put government to task. He has put government, between a rock and a hard place. And I think that's what labor unions are supposed to be doing, advocating and clamoring for, better pay and for better conditions of work, So two things. That I mentioned earlier, but also the aspect of labor unions. Do you think it is high time that every single profession began to look at labor unions as a very important aspect of their profession?
All right. Let's come again with the first question. Your first question, is it about because
you know that Dicey, who to many of us is the grandfather of rule of law, mentions that one of the tenets of rule of law is there must be equality. Okay? And our Constitution actually goes ahead to, to advance the aspect of equality. So if you have people who are giving government the same service but are getting different pay, is that an aspect of inequality? Would the Constitutional Court declare this particular increment or action by government unconstitutional?
Well, we need to first know, just like there is day, there is night. Let me first engage them briefly. Just like there's arts, there needs to be science. Just like there's male, there needs to be female. So the idea that science is more supreme than arts is a very illogical thought, because they both complement each other. The scientists would maybe come up with the innovations. Just like, there's a new innovation in law called cyber law. The lawyers would then come and then see ways of regulating these existence in society. Because the arts people are the ones who come up to be the so-called leaders of the society, people who regulate and come up with policies. So just like I said, just like there is day, there is night. Just like there's science, there is arts. Both need to be treated equally. Both need to be treated fairly. Now, brings me to your question, equity connotes to fairness. So the idea that arts and science are, one is up and one is down, is flawed. So back to the question of your discriminatory issue, whether it's equal or not. Legally speaking, Article 21 provides for equality and freedom from discrimination, be it gender, be it race, be it economically, regardless. Then Article 40 as well provides us with economic rights, that people have a right to be paid to be paid fairly in that disciplines. People have a right to belong to a labor union. All of us know that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land.
Yes.
Now we have various labor laws in Uganda. I think over like 12 laws that is to the aspect of labor in this country. But allow me to focus on majorly on the Labor Disputes and Arbitration Settlement Act, particularly Section 30 of the Labor Disputes and Arbitration Act. You know, Section 30 provides for the labor unions, provides for when, in an event whereby there is an issue at hand, the labor can go ahead and announce industrial action. In an event whereby, for example, in this instance, there is unfair increment in salaries. You cannot increase the salary of a science teacher and then neglect the idea that the arts teacher should not be, their salary shouldn't be increased, because the government's agenda is science is a priority and arts is not a priority. So from that angle, I would particularly say it is discriminatory. And in an event, let's say we are to go to a constitutional court, and if our constitutional court was, per se, fair, in that particular instance, speaking from the perspective of the law,
assuming it is Justice George William Kanyahamba.
Let's assume he was.
Yes.
Definitely, because it's discriminatory. The Constitution is clear. It has provided for us. It has stipulated the laws.
Yeah.
The Labor Disputes and Arbitration Act has stipulated for us the laws. Now, in such an instance whereby you increase the one, Honorable Leandro in last week's show says, if one person is belching meat and the other one is belching beans, then how does it relate? I was watching some videos. Someone said they paid the teachers. One person was buying 4 kilos of pork and the other one was buying a kilo of pork. So you see the inequality that it creates in society. It goes beyond what meets the eye. It goes down into simple basics that helps one survive in the community. If economically speaking, a science teacher is earning more. Imagine if a diploma holder is earning more than a degree holder, because you're teaching arts, you're a diploma holder and you're teaching sciences, you're earning 4 million, the other one is earning 800,000. How would you react in the staff room? Even if the degree holder is the director of studies, would you then go ahead and order the one earning 4 million and is teaching sciences in the staff room? When money comes in, the idea of money, it gives us a particular kind of power. So the one who is earning little, they'll develop that inferiority complex. It just goes beyond what meets the eye. Yeah. It's down to behavior. We shall explore
community. How what you're trying to explain actually relates with national security. Yes. Maybe in phase 2, but I am waiting for the point where you say, is it unconstitutional or it is constitutional?
Well, the issue there is, to me, according to the authority that I've cited, it is unconstitutional. It is very unconstitutional.
Okay, then the aspect of labor unions. Is it about time that each and every single profession, be it the accountants, be it the doctors, they should have a strong labor union and organize themselves for such times?
As I told you, every laborer in this country has a right to belong to a labor union.
Yeah.
So I think it's high time professions came up and strengthened their labor unions. We have seen there's some sort of disgruntlement between UNATU and science teachers. Science teachers are forming their own union.
Really?
Yes. Have you guys read? Yes. Science teachers are forming their own unions. Now, what is that? They formed it after 2018, when they increased, they were fighting for increment. They formed it after 2018. Now, what does that mean? UNATU was the singular body for all teachers. But then science teachers are now forming their own body. Now, look at that disgruntlement, look at that discrimination that is happening. Teachers are teachers, regardless of arts, regardless of science. So labor unions are good for fostering the rights of professions, of institutions. Then I suggest that the labor union stand strong, stand stiff, because what Mr. Baguma and his team did this time around showed unity. But after the meeting with the president, when they said there's nobody, it's highly questionable. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. That brings us to the first phase of this conversation. We hope that you're enjoying. If you have a comment, the comment section is right below your screen. Give us your comments. If you agree with any of the panelists' view, let us know. But also, if you have an alternative opinion, give us that opinion. For now, we take a short commercial break, but we shall be joined by a fourth panelist, so just stay right on set. Bye-bye.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Well, we'll be back from that short commercial break, and we hope that you are enjoying this conversation. Well, like I had mentioned to you, we have been joined by a fourth panelist, and I'll just introduce him to you right away. A comrade who has appeared here now for the second or third time by the names Rubangakene Francis Shaa, who is a student of medicine and surgery at Makerere University, but also in this particular debate where we are discussing strikes, we know that he was very active when the interns of Makerere University were, putting their message out there to be heard. So I think that informs a core reason as to why he's part of this panel. Shaa, many thanks for joining us. Good afternoon.
A very good afternoon to you, Comrade Kidega, and thank you so much for having me on this panel. I think on this panel I stand as the one and only person who has ever conducted a strike and industrial action and actually succeeded in getting very positive results from the government and the various stakeholders. One of the reasons being that we ought to fight for what is fair and just. Because if we are to move forward as a nation, we need to prioritize some things. And some of these things must be even the basic human rights. One of them being education. Not just education, but of course quality education. Right now we are faced with a situation where we've been seeing teachers go on industrial action since June, and the core issue there is disparity in salaries between arts and science teachers. But I also think that that to really center the conversation around there on is a way of, reducing what the teachers or UNATO is fighting for a lot, which is a misconception that the society keeps getting, the country keeps getting. The media houses always focus on, money, the wage bill and all that most of the times. But I think they're furthering quite a number of things, not just only science teachers, but also they're looking at primary teachers. You get it? And I think it is also important that as we are discussing this, to be very specific, we need to look back in the history of what has been happening since 2010, 11, 18, and now 2022. You get it? Because the teachers' union has been having conversations, they've been conducting industrial actions. You get it? And they've entered engagements, they've entered agreements with the government of Uganda quite a number of times. Some of them have been fulfilled, some of them have not. You get it? We have seen in 2010 where they were advocating for quite a number of things. You get a list of it. I cannot go overhead and mention them, but the government paid some of it. You get others didn't, including increment of payment. And also there was at that time the government was beginning to pay what we call the science allowance, something of that sort, and teachers were ignored. The scientists were being given that at 30%. You get, and the teachers had every single right to advocate for that. Now you see that it set a precedent for even the government that science, even to the teachers, is a priority. You get, and coming back right now, you see they cannot further the argument that so much that we are equal. You get? When there was a time scientists were receiving these, you advocated for your science teachers and left the arts teachers. Right now, you're coming and saying it's not equal, it's not fair. You get? At the end of the day, why did you then accept the arts teachers to be paid less at that time and kept quiet on it? You get what I'm saying?
Good question, yeah.
So, but before I go so much into that, we can go into that. I want to also, as we are picking on as Francis Shaa, I feel it's necessary for me to really dive into the importance of education to a developing country like Uganda before I even go further. One of it being is that education is a form or a tool of developing the country's human resource. And when you have the country's human resource developed, you're literally going to reduce poverty. You're literally going to set a framework for development. You are literally going to have the country's economy grow. You get? Because chances of having high crime rate when you're having a well-educated country or population is low. Chance of unemployment is low when they're receiving quality education. And by this, I don't mean the kind of education the basic education that we are receiving here as Uganda. You get? Of course, the government has tried. I appreciate them there. But I still do think that we can't do much. Before we even go into the conversation of whether teachers should have increased payment and all that, we also, as a form of furthering, the science teachers should have increased payment, and they're having now, as a form of furthering science and technology growth of the country. And that I think it's also important, which is a very crucial part, is that the quality of science education we're giving our children should be questioned. You get? Because if up to now we're still riding on a curriculum, or the contents of what we're teaching our students is what the British use those days, then you question what kind of science and innovation are we trying to bring on board?
There is now a new curriculum which is being implemented.
The abridged curriculum.
Yeah.
Which is being brought on board, which is a bravo, right? But at the end of the day, you ask yourself, how much has changed? You get?
Maybe it's too soon to judge, now that has just been enrolled.
We will have that conversation some months from now, some years from now. But we shall see. But a lot of curriculums have been brought on board. And still we see the core part of the integral part of the curriculum is still the same content,
Yeah.
So I think, Comrade Kidega, before you come in, I think we also need to have a serious conversation on the quality of education, the contents of what we're teaching our children, and how those contents are going to help them become innovative, start to solve problems in the science world.
No, by all means, we are going to explore that. But just conclusively, let's just tap into your experience. You said that you've managed to participate in an industrial action that was successful.
Yes.
Does that mean that the government of Uganda listens to industrial actions more? That if you don't come out to, put down your tools and say put out threats and, do all these things, they don't exactly see the value of your plight? Is that the case?
The arts guys will tell you that history really speaks volume to certain things. I will not say that bluntly that the government of Uganda only listens to industrial actions or strikes. But of course, I do think that one of the ways of implementing or producing policies in any nation is pressure from external bodies. One of them being industrial actions that the nation puts on the government if they feel that a policy is not just or fair. You get? And I think the government has actually done a good job listening to the plights. You get? Which, of course, does not indirectly say that they listen to industrial actions more, but history has shown that the government of Uganda stands to listen to pressure from out, whether through industrial action.
It succumbs to pressure.
Usually.
Okay, okay, thank you. Lawel, I want to bring you in before I take the ball back to Comrade Douglas Onen. Lawel, the aspect of national security. And I think one of you tried to use a hypothetical example earlier on that, how would an arts teacher sit here and he's belching beans, then the science teacher is belching chicken? Does that in one way or another pose a threat to national security? Is it in any way connected? Or we can just look at it from the surface of it and say, no, you know what, this is just something small. But national security in the sense that, won't I be tempted to know that, okay, Onen is a science teacher, I'm an arts teacher, won't I be attempted to even pickpocket what he has in his pocket? Because I know that he earns more than me. Won't I be attempted to, commit crime? I mean, that kind of unfair feeling that I am not being fairly treated in my country, is there an attachment to security, or it is purely?
I feel that is really far-fetched. Unless you want to mean opposition to the current government, that there will be general opposition towards government, which is normal, that people, when they feel that the policies advanced by government are not favoring them, they'll of course be on the side that wants to offer the alternative, the side that says we are going to pay you equally and we are all going to pay you good, you get. And so if you're talking about, because of the nature of our government, really, the line is very thick, especially for most of these NRM cadres, between what is against the government in power and the national security generally. There is this tendency to look at, for example, industrial action at demonstrations as against the state, yet they are just against the government, the party in power.
Against the bad policy, maybe, something like that.
The government, because there's a big difference, and it is healthy. So I think it is a threat to the NRM, because the arts teachers will be inclined towards any alternative political party or entity that promises them that we can pay you equally well. But also, maybe they are going to demonstrate. But those are demonstrations against bad government policy. They are not necessarily against national security. But also, even if we are to tone it down to pickpocketing, they have been feeding on this money, and they have not been stealing. All they are saying is that it's not enough. I don't think it will extend to the idea that now they are so homeless. And I'm trying not to be insensitive. It's that this is unjust. And all they are saying is that let us have a fair system that rewards our efforts as teachers equally. That the perception that teachers are better than arts is misplaced. It is discriminatory to that level. I don't know if you get. So I think, of course, if you do not give them what they want, they are going to put that pressure on the government in power, not national security. But I think what I also need to talk about is generally the government policy on science. I think they just don't have the capacity. They lack an understanding of how to achieve what they want. I think if you want to achieve innovation and creativity, and you have the Elon Musk you guys are talking about, the first thing you do is increase access to internet, and also have free access in terms of wider reach in villages. The entire country has
bandwidth
access
and all
to
that.
bandwidth, but also that what you have free internet. There was that policy, Frank Muhwezi, when he was still the minister in charge.
M.S.U.T.
Yes, he wanted to have free internet, at least Kampala Metropolitan. When he left 2 years after, you have instead a tax on internet. And so if you want to increase innovations and science and all these things, you increase access to
digital rights.
But also you increase your investment in research in public universities. You don't leave it to Sweden and all these other sponsors, because they only sponsor the research that favors their interests. So how you improve is also investment in research. It is not through payment of teachers. I don't think teachers will teach more hours because they're being paid more. I think the gap that needs to be filled, like I think Shaa was suggesting, is that you want to increase the environment within which these students study. Better infrastructure. You also have, for example, textbooks, that people have material. Generally, all that is lacking. The studying environment is lacking. I do not think that even if you pay teachers better, they will stop going to private schools for those side gigs. I don't think. I think generally we need to have a bigger discussion in investment in the education. Because when you step out of Kampala, step out of private schools, you come from northern Uganda, you know the environment within which these pupils learn. And so the reason why you're not going to get someone from the village getting to the top is because the schools are not there. At that time, there was a bigger government. I think the UPC government had a better understanding of the education system. But you'll understand that even then, the people who studied were few. For example, Makerere, the only university, didn't have more than 5,000 students. And so you had people from districts, from regions coming up. But now everyone has to go to school, and then the villages are left out. So for me, I don't think, and I want to be not, I don't want to be politically correct, that the payment of teachers better in and of itself is not sufficient. I don't know if you get it. The problem with the education system is not just the payment. Across the board, public servants are paid poorly. But I think the problem is the teaching environment and all that. Yeah, that's
okay. Fair enough. Madam President, let's just bring you in right away. We are focused so much on the plight of the teachers, but I think that there is the population of the pupils, of the students, who have in the past 2 weeks not gone to school, not been taught. So as someone who has been at the helm of a very powerful institution, someone who has led students, what would be your evaluation of the 2 weeks and how it has affected the students' population? And maybe you could try to draw into the gender lens and the girl child in these 2 weeks. Could we expect certain maybe this anti-moral aspects coming up, maybe pregnancies that could be seen 9 months from now that happened in these 2 weeks? Or maybe boys saying that, I mean, in these 2 weeks I got a job and I think, I mean, I'm okay where I am. So what do these 2 weeks mean for the pupils and students who didn't go to school?
Very true. Thank you very much for really bringing that angle. We tend to think that the effects of certain actions are just on the surface, but we can look at it like an iceberg, whereby we only see the tip of the iceberg, but what we feed into society actually has largely a superficial effect that sometimes we do not see until after some time passes. And the constant effect of schools being stopped for long periods of time within a short time, it being done constantly affects the pupils a lot. And we have seen scenarios where we realized during the COVID-19 lockdown that schools had posed a protective environment for students. There are very many children who literally access more services at school, things like feeding, they get it from school as opposed to at home. There's a protective envelope that the schools offer to students. So by affecting the sanctity and the safety of the schools definitely has overwhelming effects on the students, because it's kind of like a secure place for them to be. We also see scenarios whereby the breakdown of the cycle of schools affects our students' prospects. We saw students losing scholarships because they didn't have the marks to reapply for scholarship. We recently saw some scholarships withholding their offers to students. Last year, the Madvani scholarship, which I had, could not give some students the scholarship because they did not have marks to apply for it. So breaking down the cycle of studying and education affects students a lot. Of course, the teachers themselves, their discontent also affects the students, like being in a home with an angry parent. Like they say, when the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. So being in a class being taught by someone who is angry, who is not happy, it affects the quality of learning that you have. And realize that studying is comprehensive. It isn't just the matter that is taught at school. Teachers and schools offer psychosocial support to students. So someone may withhold the extra help they were giving to students that isn't accounted for in their application form. So the wellness of the teachers affects the quality of support they give to the students. So we can see someone coming to class and just teaching and walking out. After all, that's what you expect me to do. So I really believe that we need to look at this from a holistic perspective. What do we get from school? It's not just about the science and the physics. It's about the counseling, the mentorship. It's about the interpersonal building, character building of students. We have seen, for those who have gone to interviews and applications, largely you're asked about the quality of a person that you are. They can even put aside your academic qualification and they want to get to know, who are you as a person? What skills do you have? How do you relate with others? How do you respond in difficult situations? How do you think critically? And these are things that the background of a school offers. So while I can certainly agree with my comrade here that paying the teachers fairly may not change everything, but it's going to make a contribution to making it better. And it's also about having equitable pay. So the pay in itself will not be sufficient. But why don't we have equitable pay of the money that is available, as opposed to equitable allocation? You get? So instead of allocating just to scientists, how about the little that is there is shared equitably? They would still need more, but at least there would be a
sense of fairness,
a sense of fairness,
distributive justice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also breaking down the unity of the labor unions also has overwhelming effects. These unions actually come together to help the schools themselves, because these unions, we only see them on TV when they are striking, but in the background they do so much within the schools that is not aired on TV.
Yeah.
So when there is that breakdown of the union itself, there are other things that they lobby for within their schools. There are things that they do within schools that we may lose because we are seeing that breakdown of the unions. So I really believe that money being insufficient has always been there, and now the debate has changed from we want more money to why not treat us fairly. So instead of saying let me first increase money in a phased manner in terms of allocation, how about you phase the increment for everyone? So if we are all getting 50k, all of us, it's better than saying let's this one get 2 million more and this one nothing.
Yeah.
Why not 0.5?
Yeah.
So at least it will appeal to each person's emotions, because like I said, we work together. We're going to be in the same staff room, we're going to be in the same class. And trust me, the discontent of the arts teachers is also going to affect the science teachers. Of course, we're going to see some science teachers saying, okay, I'm now okay, I will relax. But there are those who have that heart of the family, and they too will not be happy. We saw them also striking with the arts teachers. So they are saying, we are happy that you paid us, but we're still sad that you haven't paid our colleagues, because we are in this fight together. So I really think that and like he said, the government strengthening these unions benefits them.
Yeah.
So making them break down and lose that synergy
And crumble.
and crumble is going to affect the state in entirety.
Okay.
So on the gender aspect,
oh yeah, sure.
definitely, like I said, schools offer a comprehensive support to the student, to the pupil. And yes, we are, as a student in primary, in secondary, seeing the constant breakdown and stopping of education, they may lose trust in the whole sector of education, because clearly there's a problem. Why is it always us who are being returned home? So now we're going to see students who are going to go into other ways of survival, because there is always a breakdown, there's always a pause on their cycle of education. And like I said, this is a place of security for very many people. When you return home, we saw more pregnancies during the lockdown. People were at home. Yes, we had thought that it was they were in a safe space. So clearly, people returning home for long periods of time without knowing when they are going to come back, it makes them vulnerable to all kinds of things, even when they consent to them or even when they don't. So yes, if we carry on in this way, there are going to be tumultuous effects like early pregnancies, early marriages, and those even dropping out completely.
Okay, fair enough. Douglas, let's bring you in. The aspect of quality of education, and Comrade President here tries to bring it out very well, that the more we have breakdown in this education cycle, it has tremendous effects, in the long run. How do you evaluate the quality of education, and how such continuous actions of teachers laying down their tools, what effect does it have on our quality of education generally speaking?
The teaching profession is one that makes society, makes a country. These are the personnel that train engineers, train lawyers, train doctors. In a situation wherein they are rioting for almost 2 weeks, we are definitely going to have trickle-down effects, both short-term and long-term. Allow me to start by engaging with the issue of the well-being of the teachers. When we just mention well-being of the teachers, we think them having enough monies in their pockets. It's just beyond having enough monies in their pockets. I know money is never enough for anyone, but you can have enough to sustain a life, to take your kids to school, to pay your rent. But in a situation whereby you're paid very meager salaries, and the salaries that you're paid that you're paid cannot equitably or sustain your living, it then therefore has also effects on the people that are going to pass on the knowledge. So now let us look at in a scenario whereby you say that teachers are not only passers of knowledge, they are people who offer psychosocial support to these kids. We are just from the lockdown. A 2-year lockdown. Students have been home and have seen the effects that they've had. The parents are yes, they help in holistic being of the child, but teachers play an important role in doing so. Now, when I look at in a situation where we have unsatisfied teachers, unsatisfied labor, they come to class because first of all they're paid very little money, they're frustrated. you know, they come with the idea that I'm just going to pass on the knowledge that I have, regardless of the system that I'm even passing on the knowledge. Now, be it good or bad, in a situation whereby the knowledge is being passed not in a way that is going to even help the upbringing of the children, then therefore now it will emanate into the quality of the students, the quality of the education that we are to see. Now, allow me to go to the aspect of quality of education. Recently, the government came up with a new curriculum that started for the current students or the current beneficiaries of this curriculum are currently senior 2.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we shall see the fruits in years to come. Hopefully, we will not come here and have this discussion crying that we hoped that this would be different. Let us be optimistic that it will be different. But let us speak to us who went through that system. We went through a system that, yes, we may be here and speak and may be slightly different, but not everyone is the same to operate in the same way or the same zeal that we people on the panel here might have had. You know, when you are down there in the village, when you're there in Gulu and a kid says, I study in Kampala, you're looked at as, you're the cream. And there are very few people who have the privilege to come and study in Kampala. Now, imagine if there's a population in Gulu looking at the only good schools are schools in Kampala. The schools in that district are not good. Now, and all parents cannot be in position to afford to pay their students in these schools in Kampala because some of them are private, some of them are government, and even those are government owned, they pay very high amounts of money. So now what does that, where does that leave us? It leaves us in a state whereby we have a divided population. We have a population that has received quality education, which is a few number, and we have a population that has received substandard education. Now, what kind of labor or what quality of labor shall we have? Let's just look at ourselves in the panel. We are few. Some of us might have gone to possibly good schools, but then there is that child who is that youth who is our same age, but went to a rural school and at the moment they're now carrying bags in Chikubo. You get. So we need to look at, we need to be all inclusive in our conversations. These conversations we only focus on rural, on urban schools and neglect the rural child, then it's wrong because we need to holistically develop as a nation. Because everyone has a part to play in life, everyone has a part to play in the nation building. So as the quality of education of this country, as you said, we shall hope to see what this new curriculum is going to do. But now that we have this one, he suggested the idea of internet. We have of having the infrastructure of internet everywhere. Let us have that because we have a very innovative youth at the moment. Regardless of the quality of education, whether poor or whether good or bad, people are very innovative. So let us have internet access everywhere. But then lastly, she mentioned yes, it's true that we have a small national basket. But then the question of how best do we use the small resources that we have? How best do we allocate these resources? The resource allocation in this country is quite questionable. You know, teachers are coming to strike in a situation whereby they look at, they're looking in a scenario whereby members of parliament are being awarded 40 million Ugandan shillings for passing on a supplementary budget. They increase their salaries every time in, time out. But then here is a civil servant who is receiving little, regardless of the little they're receiving. They're still teaching, but they're requesting for an increment in salary. So if a teacher sees that the public servants, the lawmakers who are supposed to pass laws that looks at equal resource allocation, they're rewarding themselves quite wholesomely, and for them, they're left out because teachers are the lowest paid civil servants in this country. Okay. So then, I want to bring in Shaa. Yeah, allow me to conclude. Yes. So then we now need to look at the aspect of proper resource allocation in this country. The aspect of corruption is huge. We need to tackle it. The aspect of us using the small national basket properly, and that will help us improve the quality of education, which is kind of still questionable, but we shall see with this new curriculum. Okay, fair enough. Shaa, let me just bring you in. The executive branch of government has been on the spotlight for this crisis, and have been castigated, for being the reason or being the orchestrators of this crisis and standoff between UNATU and government. And maybe we would understand, for obvious reasons, they are the executive, they control the resources, they implement and all these things. But I think that Parliament has been unfairly exonerated from all this conversation. Do you think that Parliament had a role to play, or have they had a role to play in where we find ourselves today? Because if
Parliament is passing laws and saying that we must be equal. I mean, the executive must pay maybe teachers equally. Then where do they come in to say that, no, what you are doing is not what we passed as a law, all right? Because yes, we have seen them have debates on the floor of Parliament, but we haven't seen an official position, maybe from the Speaker of Parliament, saying that, you know, this issue must be addressed in A, B, C, D way. So where does Parliament come in all this crisis?
Okay, thank you very much for such a question. First of all, you see, it is quite complicated to say that the Parliament will come out, the current Parliament will come out clearly on its position, because you, as a Parliament, you want to maintain your independency from the executive, first of all.
But you have an oversight role to play.
While carrying out your duties, you get. And and I think because NATO, first of all, entered negotiations, you get. NATO, ever since they declared their industrial action, put it clear that they're open for negotiations. But until they reach conclusions, they will not, you know, withdraw or put down their industrial action. And the executive arm of the government has been very willing to have negotiations with them. We saw they had a meeting with the vice president, and of course they did not come out with any conclusive sort of agreement, but it is clear that the VP was delegated by the president to understand what's going on. You get their plight and how they so wish it be rectified, and she had a meeting with the president on that matter, and they came out with a way. Now my problem would be, why would it always be the president? You get that the president is always put at the system, at the center of everything. It's overwhelming the president, that the president has to decide on literally everything that institutions like public service, you get, could actually handle. That would be the problem, you get. Because if this is the era of the public service, even if the president, in his opinion, in his beliefs, prioritizes science and innovation, you get, it is not his entire role to implement it. You get that the public service has to see how it is done, how it is supposed to be done, the nitty-gritties of it. You get. And if NATO has a problem with the way it has been put through, I think it is so necessary that public service be the first to jump out. But you saw the way the public service responded and all that, which has to bring in the president. So it poses the question that, is our institutions currently working for the benefits of the nation as a large? You get what I'm saying? Now, all these processes have been happening. The executive arm of the government has been trying its best to see that, one, we put back the children to class. Two, that the teachers psychologically feel that they are actually heard and are working on their issues. You get, so that when they go to impact knowledge, they're not just doing it because it's a duty or a patriotic duty that they have to do, they have to carry out, but that they actually believe they're participating in the process of building a nation. Because those are two different things. You get that much as you think you are participating, do you also have a feeling that you're just being accommodated when it comes to you? You get? Because those are two different things. Accommodation and participation are two different things. You get? And I think the executive arm of the government has been making the steps that it should do. But as where it stands, that the teachers in their union decide to call off the strike or call off the industrial action, go back to work as the negotiation on goes. You get? I think that is a positive step already by the executive arm of the government and the teachers union. You get? Because now we're seeing that advocacy, at least, of course, it's one step towards, being heard and solving a problem, but the negotiation bit of it matters really more than the advocacy. You get? Because that's where you go and then you agree upon terms and conditions.
So
now,
then,
bring the part of the parliament.
1 second on the aspect of negotiation, because the deep pocket theory that he who has leverage should be able to extend the olive branch, right? So do you think that the government, in such conditions, should be able to say that, yes, we are a government, but we are going to extend the olive branch and try to reach out. Why should it be UNATO to say, okay, we are willing to negotiate? Why can government also, at times be willing to initiate the negotiations?
First
the
of
deep
all,
pocket theory, right?
First of all, you see...
But rather, what we see is the PS of public service issuing threats. If you don't do this, then you do this.
I will try to take you back a bit.
Okay, as I wind up and to bring in Lawel.
I will take you back in our strike. You see, on a chessboard, when you are doing, when you're playing games, there are major moves and there are minor moves. You get, and then there are what we call last moves. And you're very sure when someone is making this move,
he's out of options.
He's giving it all because he's going to get it all or he's going to lose. Such a move is one of the moves is threats. You get, when you say if you don't go back to class, we will fire you. I think that is outright not the best move to do, especially when you're the one who has inflicted the wounds. You get. We've also had a similar situation in our strike, our industrial action, where all the interns were fired and ordered to leave hospital premises. But then there were only 20% who were staying in the hospital premises, of which they were paying for. You get. So we made a demand that please pay us back our money. Then we leave. They could do nothing. And they did not give an alternative. You get what I'm saying? And I think that is a move that we are seeing that government institutions are beginning to take on. You get, all the time. So
you're saying persistence breaks resistance.
And
if you persist.
In your own words, I will not say I am saying, but I think that such moves should be avoided by the government if it is a move to actually bring solutions. You get, should be avoided. And I think even if they do that, at the end of the day, you see that it is the opposite of what happens. So why not leave it entirely? You get. Now the question of whether or not the government should be the one to extend a hand in negotiation. You see, the government came out with a policy that precedent was set by UNATO by accepting the 30% money or funds for what? For the science allowance. You get, to scientists. You get. Now, such a precedent, the government will assume that, hey, they're okay. Let's sort out the science teachers now. Then in the future, we sort out the what? The arts teachers. That is the assumption. You get. They would think that UNATO would definitely come out on this way, but not the way they would assume. You get. So I think, first of all, it is not the person who has made the policy who would outright come to negotiate. You get. But I also think the executive arm of the government extended that when UNATO declared industrial action after the 90 days of sending a notice, we saw that the executive arm of the government started coming to engage them in meetings. I think that is extending a hand, an olive branch to have negotiations.
Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough. Lawel, let me bring you in. And on this particular question, I think Comrade Douglas tried to bring it up earlier on, the aspect of our economic setting. Uganda moved towards a liberal economic setting, right? Whereby most of the social services are being actually run and controlled by private players. So do you think that what we are seeing today in the education sector is only a ripple effect of the fact that Uganda took the liberal economy approach, whereby we privatize our services and things like that? But also, do you think that there is a structural there is a bigger structural question to this education crisis, that we must address the economic structural challenges for us to be able to streamline some of these ripple effects that we see in education, we see in the healthcare, we see in all these other social services. So do you think there is a bigger question that we are looking at, which could be structural in nature?
So personally, I think that the structural adjustment
program,
yes, we perhaps had little say because of the desire to have to be in good books with the IMF, Bank of Uganda, World Bank, and the Western powers, sort of. I think it is not the most deplorable thing that there was privatization. I think that when that happened, government then chose to use it as an excuse not to execute its duties to the citizens. when I got to know about that was the time we had that fees must fall strike, and the Minister of Education said that look, people in Uganda Christian University are paying higher, and they are not complaining. And so the point I want to drive is that just because there's a private sector does not mean that then the government still has a duty to the public sector to deliver as possibly. I don't know if you get that. That, for example, there is the private sector, yes, which is geared towards money, but then the government has a duty to make public schools as good, at least to a particular level. Because there was that debate, that interview during COVID, Kanare Mugumi and Museveni, which was President Museveni, which was on the question of oil, that in the absence of oil, then what do we do? And the president gave an example of Japan and said, look, countries have developed without oil, but on the quality of the human resource. And so for me, when he responded that way, I got to know that this guy knows what is supposed to be done. He knows that countries thrive on the quality of human resource. And then there is no way how you have a quality human resource when you don't invest in the education system.
That's
you get. But how do you have quality education system? It is by subsidizing education in public services, in public schools and institutions, so that you make sure that the best are able to study. I don't know if you get it, that the best are able to study. And so how do you make sure that people do not miss out on their education because they lack financial capacity, that we have the best as a result of their intelligence, that they are generally brilliant students. I don't know if you get it. So government has a duty to invest a lot in education, one, to have good public schools, so that UPE is not just for the sake, but it is a good alternative for those who cannot afford private education, so that even people who come from UPE schools are equally as good, that the best in those districts, Karamoja, etc., have a place in Makerere University or this Chambogo University or must. And so the problem we have is that there is no realistic, the policies we have are not tailored to the reality. And for me, I look at, for example, the government sponsorships that do not take into consideration who become the best at the level of secondary. Because I feel like it just adds to those who already have. Our government sponsorships are tailored towards those who can access Chitende na Magunga fast. I don't know if you get it. It does not take into consideration those who can't get to Namagunga. So they just appraise those who already have. And for me, that's the biggest challenge in this country. So I think that the privatization was something we didn't have a lot of option on whether to accept or not. But when it came into consideration, then government used it as an excuse to abdicate from its responsibility to its citizens. They have that excuse, and yet they have a duty to deliver. And so we are saying that even when they are private schools, let the government schools be equally well facilitated by government. But I think the biggest challenge also we have is what you talked about. There is this whole sector way of doing things. That this is the teachers, this is the medics, these are the engineers, this is tourism. That we do not have a robust policy in how we want to develop our country. So today the medics are going to strike, they're going to meet the president, answers their question. Tomorrow you're going to have teachers, then answers their question. But you do not have a comprehensive policy on how these sectors feed into each other. I don't know if you get it. And that can only happen if you do what Shaa is suggesting, institutionalization of things. You get this, that things are done, there's an institutional public service which addresses the issue of salaries of public servants, not just the teachers, because we also have people who are grieved even in ministries themselves, who think that these salaries are not enough. But if you had a robust discussion on salaries of public servants, then somehow you even solve these incidental strikes, because this year you will have the arts teachers, the next year you're going to have another cohort of individuals. So the problem we have is that, but of course it is a consequence of the politics, of the desire to centralize power. And I'm sure some individuals from Shaa's side enjoy it when they have the solutions to everything. But I think it's partly the challenge, really.
Okay. Madam President, Lawel hinted on something that I think I want you to expand on. Do you think it's high time we needed a salary review commission? An institution that is entirely mandated and its role is to, review the salaries of public servants and then, make proposals and recommendations to Parliament, and then we can see how to enhance salaries. Not just the president saying, okay, now science teachers, we will do this and do this. Do you think that we need to have maybe an institution whose mandate is only doing that?
I definitely agree. I agree that there needs to be a decentralized way that issues of aggrieved public servants are dealt with. And as I will say constantly, that all the different public servants in their different capacities are important. I remember while I was Guild president, after the academic staff ceasing their industrial action, the non-support staff also got into an industrial action, and offices are closed. No one is cleaning the bathrooms, no one is sweeping the school, and trust me, business stopped. Business stopped. And what's funny is that all these public servants aren't necessarily saying, pay me as you're paying the doctors, or pay me as you're paying the engineers. They're saying, pay me fairly. So even the non-support staff aren't saying, I also want the lecturer's money, or I want the professor's money. They're saying, pay me what is due to me. The time when the professors were given a salary increment, the other academic staff weren't fighting over the figure, the number of zeros that the professors were getting. They were saying, why add for only them? What about us? So like I said, if we could have that commission, probably there could be an equitable way of sharing these resources. And equity is about fairness, not necessarily equality, because we may not be equal, but we can have an equitable way that these things are given out. So I believe with this commission, we'll see that if we have 10 million, maybe this one will get a 50K increase. So they'll have maybe 200K, depending on their qualifications. Trust me, no one amongst the staff or public servants is blind to the value and extra effort it takes to become a professor, to become a doctor, to become a lawyer. But what they're saying is, I may be a cleaner, I may be a diploma holder, but I also need a fair pay. So the issue that I think we are completely forgetting is by creating this kind of disunity amongst the teachers, saying that, okay, maybe the art teachers are jealous of the science teachers, or the people who have degree holders are jealous of professors. No, it's about them wanting to be appreciated for the role that they play. And like we have said, if we didn't have someone to fix these lights, if we didn't have someone to come and moderate this discussion, my intellect may go to waste. Someone must come and regulate and put things in order for all the other systems to work. So even while we are seated here, we know there's someone behind the camera who is doing all that. Someone who came and cleaned this place. So they may get a different kind of pay, but it must be fair to the service that they are giving. So I completely agree that that commission that sees all the issues of these people can be dealt with at a go. So that we avoid issues of 1 month, the medics strike, then they pause, the next month, the academic staff strike, then they pause, then the non-support staff strike. So even if you deal with the academic staff's issues and the non-support staff strike, still no schools will not function. So if all the different units which come together, they have unique roles, but all those roles are important. And they're very fundamental to the grand vision that we see. So as a government, if we have a vision for 2040 and even beyond that, we need to see that all the different units and subsets that make the nation are supported, feel valued, and are made aware of their importance. And it must not just be in words alone. They must feel it. So I really think that this is a really huge recipe for disaster. And we are seeing this cycle continuing. And while we see government, evidences are coming, but they push people to a wall that they are forced to resort to pressure. And us people striking is to show urgency, but no one, even the teachers, would like to go on strike. No one would like to go on strike. So we should see a situation whereby being a teacher is something someone should be proud of. Being a cleaner in a university is something someone should be proud of, because they know that, you guys, I make sure that the meeting of this top management is okay. I'm contributing to my nation. So that would be a good way to ensure that there's a decentralized locus where all these things are agreed upon and discussed in unison, not just discussing this group
in isolation.
Yes.
Wow, thank you. Douglas, let me come to you. Douglas, any conflict, any disagreement usually ends up in the courts of law. But we know that the courts of law only interpret what the law is. They don't make the law, okay? So the question to you then is that with what you've heard from Madam President and then I think Comrade Lawel as well, does this indicate that there's a lacuna in the law? Or Uganda is not short of laws? We have all the laws, we have all the statutes, we have all the acts, they are there. They are even piling dust on them. So are we not short of the law, or are we short of the law? Because there's having quantity of the law, yes, it is there so much, but does it speak to the aspirations of Ugandans, to the aspirations of the people? So is there a lacuna in the law, and that is why we are seeing all this continuous industrial action? Could it be lack of a legal framework, or the law is not in question?
Allow me to start by correcting you. Yeah, it's true that the Constitution provides that the Parliament has the power to make law, and the courts of law interpret the law. Well, judges do make law, and it's in the courts of law. So definitely, they also make law, yes.
Okay.
So to answer your question straightforward, if there's a lacuna in the law, there's no lacuna in the law in Uganda. I believe we have a very comprehensive legal framework that entails all these provisions and all these issues that we're discussing here. But the problem is on the issue of what? Implementation. That has been Uganda's problem.
But Lawel says that our constitutional framework centralizes power around one particular office.
It's a political.
Yeah?
It's a political question, which I wouldn't respond to because you asked me on the legal perspective.
Okay.
So on the issue on a political question, then definitely yes. But from the legal perspective, we have the law that caters for every Ugandan, that captures the aspiration of the people. Look at the preamble of our constitution. It does stem or brings out the history, captures the aspiration of the people. So on the question of whether there's a lacuna in the law, I believe there's no lacuna in the law, but as a country, as Uganda, our problem comes in implementation. So now how best can we then implement these laws that we have? The robust laws that we have on industry action, on well-being of the people. I feel like as a nation, we need to stem away from just coming up with laws and we will not implement them. What is the essence of having Uganda is always praised for the good policies that are in place, but we are not always living up to the policies that we come up with. Why don't we go ahead, if teachers are striking, you do not have to go ahead and issue a threat to them because they are protected under the law. The Public Service Commission itself should therefore sit back and look, are we doing the right thing? If people are protected under the law, they're coming out for strikes because they're dissatisfied with what is happening. It is not. It is their fundamental right to come ahead and make their views heard because your policies that are put in place have failed to work. So the only way for them to be heard is for them to come up and strike, come out and riot. So if that is the only language that this country is yet to that this country is only understanding that if you're dissatisfied, the only way, the only avenue of negotiation is through industrial action, is through demonstration, then I think we're straying away from the path of negotiation and arbitration, from the path of us harmoniously dealing with issues, discussing them and coming up with proper solutions. Allow me then bring up lastly, I did not conclude on the issue of the quality of our education. Well, I was reading, and Botswana, Botswana at the moment, they are taking out its labor. They are taking out midwives to go and work in the UK. But then I ask myself, if a country like Botswana is exporting their human resource to go and work as midwives in the UK, what are we exporting as Uganda? Every day, over 100 people in Uganda go out as housewives, as housemaids, as security guards. Then the question of what kind of human resource are we really exporting? Are we exporting just, I don't want to.
Is it the aspect of brain drain that they're trying to bring?
Okay, the aspect of brain drain is yes. Okay, the aspect of brain drain is an aspect, but as a nation, these people do not. The quality of education, if at all we improved it, if at all we made education accessible
we would be
for
exporting
everyone,
professionals.
we would be exporting professionals rather than just substandard labor that even do not bring back enough income into the
Remittances.
country. So we need to center our conversation about accessibility of education, but not only accessibility, but the aspect that
quality.
he brings out, the quality of education. That if I'm to study in a rural area, let's say in Karamoja, I can compete favorably with Lawel, who studies in Kampala. That if I am to study if I can study from a school deep down in Rukunjiri, I can compete favorably with someone who is studying in Kampala.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so basically as a country we need to look at that. We need to make education accessible, but not only accessible, but quality education.
Fair enough. Shaa, just lastly, let me bring you in. I'll tell you one thing, that if we had a functioning economy, we would have a broad tax base, we would have more Ugandans paying taxes. That means that URA would collect much more revenue. So that means that our national basket would be much more wider, and therefore the issue of paying teachers would actually not be an issue, or the issue of paying public servants would not be an issue, because we have a wide tax base, we collect enough, the economy is working, you know. So do you think that whatever we are seeing today, the undertones, the unspoken about conversation is actually the economy? That if you have a functioning economy, then issues around payment, issues around, you know, all these issues somehow just disappear. Because I don't know, I haven't seen big economies, the BRICS and all those. I hardly see their public servants going on strike. Why? Because I think their resource envelope is actually sufficient. So do you think that all this actually goes back to the economy?
First of all, when you look at the economy, you look at quite a number of things. You look at its determinants and all that. But when you connect it to the tax base and how the tax collection is done, and then how it is then used, you want to distance yourself a bit from the economy. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much money you collect in taxation, if you're not using it the way it's supposed to be, if you're not supporting or empowering institutions, structures, government structures to deliver services to the population, even if you have a very large tax base, it's like you have a, let me see, it's like you have a full tank of water and then you pour more water in. Will it go in or will it overpour?
It will overflow.
It will overflow. You get. So you see, even if you have a lot of money or a lot of financial strength from the taxation that you collect, but the structures that is being used is not empowered, it's not functional to the way they should be progressively, then you cannot still do better service delivery. You cannot have such issues resolved. Because people's interest, people's demands will always continue fattening every single moment. You see right now, interns are being paid 2.5, MOs are being paid 5 millions. In the next 1 year, they're going to be crying for more, right? It's the same as the science teachers. In the next 1 year or two, they're going to be crying for more, right? Because somehow, people will always want to have more and more and more. And it is in human nature to want to have that. Now, I think the conversation that we want to have here is that how does the government then start to empower its institutions to deliver these services in a way that it produces effects like knocking out corruption, embezzlement, unmotivated staff who only want their selfish interest, bring about patriotism or even nationalism in their civil servants. You get what I'm saying? In these institutions. Because you see, when institutions think that it is upon them to deliver this, it is their sole duty and not the duty of a president, you get it? Just the president, then they are obligated. Someone feels the participating in this and they will deliver to 100. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think the conversation should be in the empowerment of institutions, empowerment of systems, and ensuring they're operational, they're functional to 100.
Yeah.
Then can we have this problem? So the question of whether it is stemming from the economy is one that we can have after we have seen how to empower this, because it's a progressive thing, right? Yeah. Now, before I actually conclude, I want to respond to something my brother Lawel here, comrade Lawel from the other side, apparently we are now on the other side, brought out about increasing rate or cultivated innovation through increasing access to internet and communication capacities. I really want to differ a bit, you get, in the fact that I think that technology only determines to what extent innovation goes, not being what the cause or the necessary bait for of innovation. Innovation comes from powerful education system, education structures that students learn, or pupils or children learn to think. They will only use technology as a tool to promote their thoughts, to promote their innovation. You get what I'm saying? That no matter how much we have internet access and all that, we've seen many in public institutions, like Makerere has internet access everywhere. Every hall of residence, I'm not talking about the quality, let's leave it there, but at least they have access, you get. But how much innovative have Makerere students become? You get what I'm saying? We have only seen that it has determined to what extent Makerere students are being innovative. You get. And that also goes down to the grassroots. You get. Even if you have full-time access to internet in rural areas, as long as the schools do not have enough classrooms, there's overpopulation of students, there's the teacher-children's pupil ratio is too high, there are no scholastic materials, the teachers are not motivated, children are leaving school to go and do other things, there are other impeding factors like early teenage pregnancy, early marriages, and all these factors that affect students are not improved. Students or
flogging a dead
will
horse.
not be innovative.
Okay, thank you. Comrades, our time is fast spent, but it's only fair that I give you 30 seconds each, just to give us your last words on the show. I'll begin with Lawel, go back to Shaa, Douglas, then the lady will give us her last words. 30 seconds, Lawel.
Thank you so much. I think conclusively, it's sort of consensus that we need a very robust approach on how to deal with the public institutions, not just the education sector, but how these interact with each other. I want to thank you for the conversation. I think we can agree that at least my take is that the challenge is not essentially salaries of these teachers. It's bigger than that. It is with the welfare of the schools and institutions, and government should, even on top of paying these teachers well, they need to invest. I think budget priorities, they need to allocate more in education system. Like he says, we need more scholastic materials. We need generally better facilitation, not just at the center, but also in the peripherals, in all parts of the country. Thank you so much.
All right, Shaa, your last words.
Thank you very much. Today, I did not join the first session of the show. Sure. I came in second. I thought actually I would have more time to talk in the second session, but it's okay. Fair and just, right? Yeah. But I think this has been a very fruitful conversation on the topic of industrial action by the teachers and their advocacy for equitable payment. And I think they have a point, and the government should, in fact, not just should, must listen to them. Because disparity in payment breeds a lot of factors and does not create a good and learning environment for our children. That our children learn from the teachers, not only what they teach them in class, but how the teachers conduct themselves, how the teachers front their issues, how they behave. If teachers have issues within them, and if teachers are contradicting each other, teachers are not, our children will pick up on those. And it will affect them in the long run. The way they think, the way they do their things. And we've already seen that we already have so many other problems. Do not let salary disparity be one of them. Because it may not be the cause, but it will be a fuel to affecting the psychology of our children, the way they think, the way they will grow, and they're at a very critical stage of their development, where whatever happened now will determine how they think when they're at Lawel's age. Okay. Or Kidega's. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Douglas.
In the view of the foregoing, we have all agreed that teachers are the bedrock of the foundation of the human resource of this nation and the world at large. So we need to make sure that regardless of the pay, it has to be fair, because you cannot determine what is enough, because it's endless. Regardless of it being endless, we need to give them what is enough and what they and what is due to them, because unsatisfied labor obviously renders unsatisfied obviously renders output which is not good. So, but we have agreed on a number of aspects, come up with various policies. And I think as a nation, the government needs to take up initiative to not only, fairly pay its public servants, but also look at investing wholesomely in the education sector, not only by reimbursing the teachers, but improving the infrastructure of education. Not only making it an urban thing, but taking it down to the rural setting and make every Ugandan access quality education, because in the end, these are the Ugandans that are going to render and push this country forward. Thank you.
Amazing. Yes, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank my fellow panelists who have it has really been a constructive conversation, and I know we have all learned a lot, and also our moderator for the wonderful coordination of us all.
Yeah.
I would like to really end this conversation by re-emphasizing that there really needs to be a conversation about ensuring that all the different public servants are looked at the same time, to avoid repetition of the same problem in another sector, because we have to unanimously agree that all the different disciplines and professions have a unique role to play in the grand scale of the vision that we have to lead to its achievement. So to avoid different disciplines, different professions launching the same fight at different points of time, how about we deal with this at the same time? And I also believe that, as opposed to just appreciating or satisfying the needs of one discipline, we would rather see a situation whereby there is equitable sharing of the little resources that we have, to ensure that there is a certain form of satisfaction all across the board, as opposed to one angle, one side being partially satisfied and the other not. And just like my comrade Shaa said, the needs will only increase. But I believe that the needs increase just by the cycle of life, because we see the quality of life increasing, cost of life is increasing at all times. So if in 5 years teachers come again, it won't be because of greed, but because it's just the way life is. Yeah. And ideally, our economy should also be growing to be able to cushion the increasing need of people. So we should not necessarily blame different public servants for continuously coming back to request for more and more, as we have seen all of us here in one or another have felt the pinch of the increasing prices. And I also believe that in one way or another, the funds that we invest in these people comes back to the government, comes back to the nation, because we have seen scenarios whereby teachers pay students tuition. Someone is sick and they don't know where to go. A teacher is going to pick from what they have been given and support. And I always see this right from primary till university. We have seen scenarios whereby a student was facing an issue and the teachers had to come together and pay for this. So with them being discontent, all those little ways that the money comes back to the nation will be crippled. And they belong to these different unions, which are funded by them themselves, you get? Yeah. So they fund the nation, the unions, and that philanthropy will only be strengthened when they are empowered to be able to give what they have received. So I really believe that all disciplines have a unique role to play. It may be different, but it doesn't make one any less important than the other. So let us see that fairness, that value, that evidenced appreciation of what we all have to offer, to ensure that we have we move smoothly, gradually but smoothly, towards the vision we would like for the country.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, maybe one last thing. One thing which still Lawel talked about, that the NRM youth somehow begin to not give criticism, because at the end of the day, if you do, then it's seen as a betrayal to the movement or something. I think that is one which is kind of maybe the reality here, in the way the youth think, but it cannot be substantiated in the way the structures and the way NRM is operating. The NRM has a constitution, and in its constitution, it has a chapter called Duties and Rights of the NRM members. And one of the articles says that any member of the NRM party has a duty to offer positive criticism to any government policy, NRM member, or any progress that is being made in the contrary at the level which is possible.
Okay.
In the most respectable way.
Yeah.
The only problem that we may have is that the guys on the opposition think that we should offer criticism the way they deem so fit
Yeah.
to offer it.
Yet you have your own ways of doing it.
But then we can have our own ways, and it doesn't have to satisfy your interest. You
Okay.
get?
Let us not begin another political debate. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Comrade Shaa, for making time, Comrade Douglas Onen, Comrade President, and Comrade Lawel. Thank you for sparing time to be on the Youth Roundtable of this particular episode. To our producers, thank you very much for ensuring that our viewers get this show right on time. This has been it from us for this conversation. We hope to continue this conversation in the public discourse, in the professionals, and anywhere else. But from the Youth Roundtable, we say have a lovely week and see you next week, same time. Bye-bye.